How on for do? I gladly for see another day for joining me on Gullah Talk. I have a beautiful guest joining me, the Dr. Ebony Toussaint. We're gonna figure out how to say her name when she comes up on the stage, but I cannot wait for her to join us. So stay tuned. She'll be right with us. Welcome to Gullah Talk. I'm Dr. Jessica Berry, and please say hello, drop a hello in the chat. How you for do to Dr. Ebony Toussaint. Welcome to Gullah Talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. We are very happy to see you here on Gullah Talk. We just talk Gullah because it's important for us to start these conversations and continue the conversations. Dr. Toussaint and I met several years ago in this work. I don't know, how did we meet? Let's start there. Do you recall how we met?
Through Tendaji, my classmate and friend, Tendaji Bailey, whom I love dearly. He was doing some programming with the Corridor, and now he's since done that Gullah Geechee Futures Project and is doing stuff with the Morehouse Movement Memory Justice Project. So all of which, I feel like we all are very communal. So we all are making sure our efforts are, together and collaborative and more.
Absolutely, and aligned.
Yeah.
And
so
Go ahead.
I met you through him. I think you were doing a series of language workshops for the Corridor, and I had popped up on him at the Arsenal and was like, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. What's up?" Or either I was taking him my books or something, and I think y'all were in a meeting, and he was like, "Oh, I actually need to introduce y'all," and so the rest is history.
The rest is history. I love how we make those connections. Tendaji is actually going to be on Gullah Talk later in the year, so I'm really excited for all of these things. Can you tell us a bit about your Gullah heritage and how it shaped your upbringing?
So I am born and raised on the island of Beaufort. So Beaufort is a series of barrier islands, and it is the city and the county and like all the things. So people are like Beaufort. And so my family, my mom's side of the family, I grew up with my grandparents on a small family farm, actually out in Dale, which is a small unincorporated town near Yamasee and Labico. You keep going, you get to Gillisonville, Coosawhatchee. So, and then my dad's family, you go a little bit, keep going past like Yamasee, Coosawhatchee, Gillisonville, then you get to Jasper. And so I feel like Jasper County to me is like one of the forgotten parts of the Corridor. Very, very Geechee people in Jasper. And then some of my daddy's other side of the family is from St. Helena. And so lots of stories there with my grandma taking her bateau out and going back and forth between Jasper and St. Helena and that kind of thing, because that's what they used back in the day, right? So all of my upbringing is basically between there, the island of Beaufort, Ladies Island, and St. Helena Island. And I got one of my first jobs out on St. Helena Island, actually at St. Helena Elementary School, running their kindergarten after school program during my senior year when I was a teacher cadet. And so just some of my best memories is literally just growing up and what I wanted to get away from, right? When you're a child, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. It's a small town living. We didn't realize what we had. Like, I don't know why my old stubborn self had to leave and come back. But this literally, I think growing up, you don't realize the community and all of what you have just in that small town space. I didn't realize everybody didn't have that until I moved away, and it was just like, what? And I felt so alone and on my own compared to growing up. You're with people, you're protected, you're together, you're provided for, and I didn't feel like I needed for anything really until I went to college and was by myself. And it was like, oh, and then back then, we talked about this before, it wasn't a proud thing to be Geechee, and my mom even made sure, which, it's not no slight against her, but it was just like, oh, don't talk like that, a constant correcting us from our native tongue, our native speech, Gullah and Geechee, our Creole language. It was like, oh, don't say stuff like that. And, don't say bus up or bunkie. And the things that we would just talk at home with cousins and family, you don't think nothing of it until you go out and then there's another gaze, and you're just like, oh, I have to elocute, the Queen's English,
gotta be
So
but you know what's interesting to me about that is even though you grew up in Beaufort, St. Helena, down closer to the water, and I grew up further up in the corridor in the inland, we share similar stories in that our parents kind of almost suppressed our identity for the sake of us being successful, if you will. And you look at us, both of us have doctorates and have navigated really interesting spaces, but found our way back to like the root and the heart of it, like understanding where we came from and it's important. So I always think it's interesting to meet people like you and talk to people like you who didn't grow up exactly where I grew up, but our stories are so similar, which speaks to the story of Gullah people coming from all over Africa, but then merging together to create this culture that expanded so far and so wide and so deep.
Yeah.
And when it's like once you go away, then you recognize it. It's like, oh, wait, this is important. Wait, I should be proud of this. Did you ever have anyone in your family talk to you about being Gullah Geechee before you left to go off to college?
I think it was mainly Heritage and Gullah Festival was like the places where it's like we're using these words, to describe who we are. I think, the Gullah Festival every May, which I think is now over 50 years old now, and like a nonprofit, the original Gullah Festival in Beaufort, because I know there's a series of festivals now along the corridor, and Heritage Days, which we just had the 40th one last year, which is at the Penn Center every second weekend in November. For historic reasons since the 80s. And I think just honestly dancing and playing music, we've always been very, funga, lafe, very, come by here. So just growing up singing the songs and dancing. And of course, me growing up a musician and a singer and things like that, and being like the head of the percussion, composing music. I think the first time I heard Gullah, like in reference to, me and us, I may have been 5 or 6. And I want to say it was because one Gullah Festival, Queen Quet, would always say Gullah, and Geechee. And I'm like, we kids are like, put a little beat.
Yeah.
Okay, we Gullah, we Geechee. And then I remember seeing Anita Singleton Breaker, Aunt Pearlie Sue. And people don't understand, she is a master storyteller. She literally has a master's in education. We share an alma mater. We're both USC Gamecocks. And I saw her perform and telling our stories, and it was like, the whole time. And I remember looking at her on that stage, and I said, I'm going to perform with her one day. And then 10 years later, who touring with her and the Gullah kinfolk and singing and beating my drum. And she's looked out for me ever since. I think, like, honestly, all these elders and matriarchs that have just nurtured me. Again, you don't appreciate till you leave and you're like, oh, where my people at? Like, I gotta, it felt like dimming your light a little bit, like, I can't stand out like that. I gotta make sure. So literally whenever I talk to you or we around other people and we go and we switch, it's like my soul lights up, like in a way, I'm home. I am home, like I'm free. Because we had to navigate these environments that weren't created for us, so with us in mind. And our parents, and again, they did the best they could. They wanted to make sure we survived and that we did well in those environments. So,
Absolutely. Now, this is not on my question list, but I told you we might veer from that anyway. But I was on social media probably over the last couple months, and there was like this emergence of this idea of compounds, right? People are like, I want a family compound. And another post came up just recently, and I saw it was like, this is what we aspire to, a family compound. But when I saw it, I thought in my mind, we've been had compounds in Gullah communities. We've been living like that. Can you speak to that, like in your childhood, like maybe what may have been some of your favorite memories or traditions? And like they talk about compounds, but what did that look like for you living in a Gullah compound community?
My mama's side and my daddy's side, everybody, and obviously we were less mobile for different reasons, right? I'm not judging nobody who never left, and me being the one who left and moved away. I want to say probably both sides of my family, I'm like the one who left and moved away, right? But it made it so, to be fair, mom's side of the family, everybody in one little hill, we can get to each other. If not, you like walking distance, driving distance, or you can catch a ride with a cousin. Daddy's side of the family, same thing. Like, it's not called a compound, but we call it the hill, or going up the hill to grandma's house, or going up or down the hill. It's always go up the hill or down the hill. And everybody is right there. You knew what cousin was there, who was home. There was a sense of community. Even people who weren't family, they were always welcome. Like my family's always cooking. Like food is always be a big part of my research because we was always cooking, we was always eating, we was always feeding people. So to me, that was how we showed our love and how we survived and thrived in a lot of those recipes. And so when people talk about stuff like that, I mean, it's sad to say, I think we talked about this before too, with heirs property and like people dying, like older people in the family. And then now so many heirs have rights to the land and now people want to sell it off because it's waterfront real estate property. And it's like, really, this was great granddaddy land post emancipation. Why would you want to, sell this and you don't even live here? So we had some bougie city family, right? Great migration that went up to Chicago, and they would come down and spend the summers in South Carolina with their country Geechee family and then migrate on back up to Chicago. And just the past 10 years have just, the family, we have not been the same. I don't think we'll probably never be the same. But I think, so when people talk about compounds and building these like systems of reliability, somebody else's work in the community, she's a friend and also one of my other classmates, she's friends with me and Tendaji Bailey, Sarah Days, like her shadow work and her hoodoo practice and her work on the South as a portal. It just reminds me of Sankofa, like we have everything we need. Like we don't, to go back and get it is what it means and bring all these things that's useful from the past. So I think a lot of people, especially Black people, we're leaning into the ancestral wisdom, that stuff that's already been there, that need for community, that longing, if they haven't already been practicing it, like we Gullah Geechee people have, I think it's calling a lot of people in to be like, wait a minute, individualism isn't going to save us. Capitalism isn't going to save me. I need other people. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. But like you said, to me, for us, me and Sarah talked about Afrofuturism. That's why people are using that word. That's newer since the 90s. That's Sankofa. That's already been Gullah. We've been doing that. We've been using that. Pathways, our roots, all that kind of stuff. So none of that is new to me. It's like, oh, are people finally realizing we need each other again? Like, so I'm happy.
Well, I think the community shifted to that idea of individualism. I can do it by myself. I don't need this community. I need to move away and get all this education in order to be successful. But to your point, I think people are recognizing that there was so much value. Like I recall, similarly, we called it the hill. Go up the hill. We lived on the hill. It was family. If I didn't have rice, I went next door. I didn't go drive to the store. I went to somebody's house to grab the things that I need. And so I think that there are a lot of lessons people can learn from the Gullah Geechee community who may be longing for that sense of community that we kind of know as a natural, normal thing. And it breaks my heart, to your point, with gentrification and sort of the dismantling of our communities. It's in a way sort of hurting in some spaces those communal avenues that we still retain. Like my mom lives in Snowden, a Black settlement community in Mount Pleasant, and I was out there a few days ago, and now they have a sign and it says Snowden community, we're better together, or something like that at the bottom. But I was happy to see the sign, simply because when you put that sign up, it's almost like you laying your stake in the ground that this is a community. This is not a space for you to come in and buy up property and move in. We're established. And so that establishment is what I love to see and want to see continue to help Gullah Geechee people kind of retain that communal space, if you will. You have a lot of layers to you. I want you to tell us a little bit. If y'all don't know, I'm going to tell y'all just 3 things, and I know she's going to go into more of them. But this young lady has a doctorate in health sciences, health services, okay, a master's in public health, a master's in nursing. She's a nurse, okay. She's written a book called G for Gullah, and is now the creator of Aurora Comics, an amazing comic series with a partner. I'm gonna let her tell you all about the work that she's doing, but I think you all need to know about this superwoman over here doing all the things.
I appreciate that. I think all of it, honestly, is because I'm from a long line of storytellers. So to me, honestly, all of it is just different means to tell stories. And one of the tagline that we came up with, me and my podcast partner, Carla Madrano, we came up with was health, culture, and comics. And honestly, comics is basically, my work sits at the nexus of arts and humanities, because my first degree, my bachelor's degree, is actually liberal arts. So I graduated from the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina. And so I'm happy my foundation was in the humanities, because that puts the humanness in the biomedical and health sciences work that I do. Sometimes people can leave out the human aspects of like the patient care experience and people that we study in like our various like clinical trials and things like that. But Aurora Comics Podcast, Aurora Monroe is Storm's name, the X-Men. So we're celebrating 50 years, while Marvel's celebrating 85 years. Storm and the X-Men have been around for about 50 years. And I mean, she's Earth's mightiest mutant, the Eternal Storm. And so she just finally got her own solo run, comic book series by Mariwa Ayodele, who we have interviewed on Aurora Comics Podcast. And so when I talk about comics, I need people to know, like, it's just a medium. And so it's a way that I view that we can communicate science. I love science communication. I focus on that rather than health literacy. I think for me, it's taking more ownership as both a clinician and scientist to say, hey, if I need to pause and explain something to somebody better, then I should do that instead of me focused on, is this person literate? I think that puts all of the onus on the patient and the people in the populations. And so I would rather focus on what I can do. Again, coming from that sense of community, how can I help people help themselves and help us? Because helping you is helping me. I am because we are, which is one of our principles, right? And so that's how I approach all of my work and everything I do in my life. But comics is sequential art. And so it is a way to get people to better understand storytelling with visuals. And so it's now being researched. It's an effective form of communication. You yourself are in speech and language and linguistics and that kind of thing, like more the mechanics of language. But I think adding pictures to that and visual is like a way to also affirm multimodal learning, because people learn in different ways. And so to me, that's a big way to get knowledge of our health and communicate science out there, and also ways to celebrate Gullah Geechee history and culture. So that's like all up and through everything that I read and write, for the most part, speculative fiction, horror, like all the things. There's always some way or some borrowing to me of Gullah Geechee culture. And so you said all the things correctly about the different degrees, but I think what it all brings me around to, the ancestors are strong with this one, okay? Because I think it all brings me back to storytelling, and it's making sure that I prioritize our culture and history and heritage in a way that's true to us. We're an oral tradition. It's who we are. We didn't have things written down until, we get the father of Gullah studies, right in Orangeburg County, South Carolina State University, Lorenzo Dow Turner. And so that's not even 100 years ago. That's like almost just now at 100 years, right? So we only have about a century of writing these things down, when before we just had a way of knowing and a way of sharing information and our ways with each other. So Aurora Comics Podcast to me just was a natural trajectory for everything. I think I was finalizing my nursing training, and I met Carla, this beautiful nurse. She's published. She's one of the top selling writers and comic book sellers at Concrete Comics. Like, she wrote Luna, the Queen of the Moruvians. Like, she's amazing. She's done like hospice nursing and cardiac telemetry. She's now in nursing education. And I think both of us were just like, it's time for women to shine. That's why we named it after Aurora Monroe, who's like, again, this top superhero, but some people don't even consider her a superhero. Like, there's this whole argument I just had with a friend about whether or not the X-Men are superheroes. But I'm like, we know why. She even has a cape, but it's because she's a woman and she's Black and she's a part of the diaspora. And her name is, challenging for people who only speak one language to pronounce. And so it's just, again, Aurora Comics Podcast, I think, was just a natural birthing out of me and Carla just wanting to highlight our, again, health challenges in the community. We've discussed mental health, maternal mortality, cancer, stroke, sickle cell anemia, and HIV/AIDS, and a lot of different topics. We've covered different parts of the comics industry. We got Eisner Award-winning writers. We have artists come on the pod. We have editors. So just people that are involved in comic studies, academia, just different parts of comics. And so we're not just your standard comics podcast where we're just doing reviews, but again, we're health, culture, and comics. And it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life right now. I'm really proud to call Carla a friend and my podcast partner.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you all had the forethought to think through adding that element to conversations around Black people and culture and health. And I think it's a really unique way to frame that conversation and to gauge interest. I'm also curious. You mentioned this idea of Gullah being an oral tradition and not being written down. And so we have almost a little bit of catching up to do, right, in writing down and telling our stories and writing. But I think you've helped move us along with the publication of your book, G is for Gullah. It introduces readers to Gullah Geechee culture in a really unique way. It's super kid friendly. What was the inspiration behind you writing that book?
Martha. Oh, Martha. I am Martha's granddaughter. I am her legacy. I get emotional whenever I talk about my grandmother because she passed 10 years ago. And I still feel like we had so many more adventures and stories to share. And because of her, I got to birth this beautiful nonprofit, which all the proceeds support scholarships along the quarter. We've given 2 scholarships so far. We're hoping to give another 3rd this year. And so all of it's tax deductible. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm married to a business and contract lawyer. And so literally I probably put in more money into GS Gullah. I've not gotten any of it. But that was the goal, was to create more Gullah Geechee youth going into the health professions and biomedical sciences, because we're from a long line of healers. And it was actually something you said to me a few years ago. I don't know if you remember, but you was like, because we should, other people shouldn't be more interested in us than we are. And
I remember.
Like, you're right, sis. Like, you're right. Like, we got, white people at Yale studying us. Like, but let us do it, and it's me search. But me search is valid. Me search is research. My research, just because I'm Geechee and I'm studying about Gullah Geechee people, it's culturally rigorous then. And it's also going to be scientifically rigorous because I'm well trained. I've gone to the top universities in the world in my professions. And I'm also Martha's granddaughter. So I
wish I had a cheering sound where the claps could go. I might actually insert right there, pause. See what I'm talking about? We need hand claps for that, because you hit something. People devalue the power of our insight as owners of this culture, but also valid contributors to scientific research. And it bothers me. It's like, you can't study your own culture because somehow it invalidates you. They do it all the time. Nobody criticizes other people for studying themselves. And it's scary to me, because what it does is it almost puts a lid on the next generation from continuing to move forward in this line of work and really prioritizing ourselves. And to your point, I remember saying that. And now that you say it, it tickles me again, because it's like, it's so interested in ourselves that we advocate for us. We talk about us. We stand proud in who we are. And we got to do more of that. That's why Gullah Talk is here, because I want people to hear that line and see you and see how you've taken the traditional route by means of degree and education, but by no means a traditional route in how you took that information and interpret it in a way that makes major impact in our community. It's a blueprint. What you're doing is a blueprint. And so I was like, I got to get her on here, because people got to see the blueprint and see how we blossom and we share Gullah in each of the unique ways that are informed by our ancestors. They're informed by our grandparents and our parents and the things that they live. But we hold the stories, but we got to tell them. We can't keep them to ourselves. I'm curious, though, what's been the most rewarding response that you've gotten, either from the readers of your book, comics, or just even maybe in your nursing practice as you use what you learned to impact the community?
Honestly, what you just said, that is the goal. It's FUBU, for us, by us. So people ask me what I do and who I do it for, sorry, I got to put some hip hop in there. But it's for we. Like, I'm like, so to come home, and I needed that reset 5 years ago, to come home and be appreciated and respected and admired at home, and to just be a light for the Gullah community. And I always flip it back. I always tell people, that's why you hear me say Sarah Days and Tendaji Bailey, and you will hear me say Mahogany and Queen Quet, Anita Pratha, Natalie and Ron Days. I'm always going to say, go talk to other Gullah Geechee people. Because I always tell people, I warn people that any workshop, anything I do, disclaimer, just did one last week. If you meet any Gullah Geechee person, like, I'm the sole authority, I'm the person, contact me. I'm like, run. I said, you should want to other people's story. I'm from a small place along the corridor, just Beaufort, baby. You from Hughie, the big one, not the little one. Other people are from other people are from North Carolina, other people from Florida, Georgia. And so we have to hear all our stories and come together. People always ask, oh, what's the difference between Gullah and Geechee and Gullah Geechee and all of that? I said, all you need to know is we unite front, baby. We together. Don't try to separate us now. We know within the group we can be like, oh, you from Charleston, oh, you from Savannah. We can do that, but you can't do that. We can't do that. You know? And so I think that is the most rewarding thing, is being able to sit at the feet of elders, being able to now that I wrote that book, G is for Gullah, 5+ years ago, and I had been talking about it with my cousin probably since my grandma passed like 10+ years ago, but finally COVID hit the reset, finally got some time to sit around and do it. And I say it was the ancestors, it was my grandma, because it's birthed so many things, a grant to, create an award-winning class that's now turned into a series of workshops. Now I get to still study hyperglycemia and work on that protocol in the largest county in South Carolina at the largest academic medical center. I'm building on previous work of the Gullah Church Nurses Association from 30 years. Like, I'm getting emotional just talking about it, because I didn't know I'd be here doing this work. It was days when I was studying my dissertation and fighting to talk about faith and academia. My cohort can tell you this. They knew I was the Gullah Geechee person. They knew I was the faith person, but I didn't know how I was going to get funded and how I was going to work any of this out. But so when you talk about curating and being like an architect and going the traditional route, but trying to do non-traditional things, the road has not been easy. But I thank God for the people that came before, because I know they made it possible and they're still with me. I don't do none of this alone. It's all in community. It's all my ancestors. But the fact that I'm working on work that the Gullah Church Nurses Association recruited people for the Sea Island Sugar Project. They curated the largest collection of genetic ancestry material for Gullah Geechee people ever. First of its kind, to study why we were getting hyperglycemia at other rates higher than other groups of African Americans. But why Gullah? So people ask me, why not all South Carolinians? Why not all Black people or Black Southerners? Because I'm Gullah Geechee. That's why. That's why it's okay for me to just want to focus on us. And it's thousands of us. Some counts is up to 1 million, because the migration was real. We went to New York. Many of us, migrated to New York. I'm hearing now there's Gullah Geechee people who went to California, probably went to Detroit, Philly, Chicago, other places in the Great Migration 100 years ago. So getting to do this work decades later, and to see why we found that they identified the 2 gene expressions that are activated in Gullah Geechee people that explain the development of type 2 diabetes or hyperglycemia, elevated glucose in your blood. They are identified it. What have we done with that information? Are we still testing Gullah Geechee people and family to see, do you have this gene? Maybe you need more stricter carbohydrates in your regular food intake. If we know you a carrier of this gene, it's not something's wrong with you, or you're stupid, or you're illiterate, or you ignorant, or your food ways are bad, which those have been disrupted. We started on that. But it's like we have this scientific information that we can use to empower our community. And I'm like, God, why I always got to be building something? Why you got to call on me? You got the wrong Ebony. But apparently the ancestors and God up there, they working it all out. And so I'm the one that's supposed to be fussing about it, Dr. Berry. I'm the one that's supposed to be fussing.
Good. And keep fussing about it. And I'm going to keep creating a platform for us to get together and fuss and say it louder. So much so that y'all probably saw me reaching over to create that banner that's scrolling that says, it's okay for us to focus on us. Save that quote, type that in the chat, because that could not be more important. If you take nothing else away from today, it's okay for us to focus on us. Gullah people had to focus on Gullah people, had to lean on Gullah people for century after century in order to be where we are today. So we got to focus on us. We got to celebrate us. We got to call each other's name. We got to lift each other up. We got to hold each other accountable, speak life to each other. That is so important. But that's the essence of what it means to be Gullah Geechee. I don't know any other way, because in my Gullah Geechee community, that's what we were told. We look out for the one to the left, the one to the right, the one to the front, and the one to the back, and we don't let each other fail or fall. Now, like you said, now in our little group, we're gonna look at you, we're gonna get you right. But to the outside, don't you bet not say nothing. You bet not open your mouth. You get boxed off. You can't box off.
Because we gonna ask y'all Charleston Geechee people why y'all be putting egg in y'all stew now. Why y'all putting that boiled egg in y'all beef for stew now?
Good. gotta have an egg in there.
You gotta throw an egg in there. It was good. Now I tried it for the first time, you know, with BJ, BJ and Nate. Now I tried. I said, "Oh, okay, all right."
Change your life. Change your life. But interesting.
We had a good time in North Charleston.
That's so good. And just even those little small nuances, some people don't understand. And I think that might be a misconception. So that leads me to my next question. What do you think might be some of the biggest misconceptions about Gullah Geechee culture?
Oh man! Again, I got to shout out Queen Quet. That's why I'm so connected. We so connected. I loved one of the things she said. I want to say it was at Heritage at the Education Symposium, the last Heritage in 2024, about when she's talking to diplomats and doing stuff, you know, with the United Nations and the type of diplomacy work that she does to bring education and awareness about the Gullah Geechee Nation. When she switched, why when we switch, it's like, oh, that's ignorant. But she talked about how somebody can go speak French or speak Spanish or Italian and then switch and speak English, and it's not a problem. But if I Geechee and I say what's going on and we, you know, what for do, uno how uno for do, why when I switch back? Why is it not perceived the same? You know, this is still a language. It's an English-based Creole language. It's not me speaking broken English. And so this is one of the first things people always ask me is why you don't have an accent, or, oh, is it a language? Is it, oh, I thought it was just broken English. And why would you say that to somebody if you thought it was? And even in Creole, it's still, there's a word for Creole. What you're calling broken is actually Creole, which means it's a combination of people who originally spoke other languages. And how beautiful is it that our culture is a combination, community creation of people who spoke other West African languages? How beautiful is that? That's not broken English. They put their words from their native tongues and ancestors with the Queen's English, and we got Gullah Geechee. It's an English-based Creole language, but don't call it broken, baby. We are anything but broken. And so that's probably one of the fears. When people say, oh, you don't have an accent, I'm like, I don't know you. Why would I speak my language to you? People would never ask anybody that speaks another language. Somebody can speak French, they can speak Spanish, and when they speak English, and it's English just as this flawly executed. I can speak English just like this. You won't hear an accent. But why are you expecting an accent from me? And even if you hear an accent, it means the speaker knows another language besides English. Especially when it's somebody who only knows English.
Celebrated. And it should be celebrated. I mean, when you think about the metacognitive skills that it takes to be able to navigate multiple linguistic structures, it's a huge feat and it's taxing. And I think that some people diminish what we bring to the table as Creole speakers. And I love that you frame it in that way, because the concept of anything broken is that it's bad, it's disposable, it doesn't need to be seen, or that something's wrong and it needs to be fixed. But when you put it in the context of Creole, it elevates it automatically because people recognize French Creole. But when you say Gullah's a Creole, they're like, oh, wait.
Oh, that Geechee talk? Oh.
Right. Yeah. So that's so powerful.
But now we're being called on by healthcare systems to come and give grand rounds and presentations about our language, our people, how to care for us, different considerations in our community, our foodways, our faith, because we're not just, you know, and even when I talk to people, because people don't know the difference between nationality, race, and ethnicity. I loved in the 2020 census for the first time, you could write in your ethnic group, Gullah Geechee, baby.
Gullah
so
down.
That was the first time in my life. I'm like, yes, I am Black. I'm American. Again, race, nationality, ethnicity, Gullah Geechee. And I've been telling every Gullah Geechee person every 10 years from henceforth and forevermore, next one's 2030, write Gullah Geechee on that ethnicity line. Hopefully it'll be optional to choose from. Maybe.
Right. And it's interesting that you say that because I'm working on a paper that I got to go edit today. But one of the feedback from the reviewers was, I didn't see any census data. I'm sure there's census data to quantify how many Gullah speakers there are. And so that in the scholarly realm, it blew me away. There are people that are reading scholarly work and telling me as a Gullah Geechee person that I can go pull data from the census to count how many Gullah people. That the context in which we are not understood or misunderstood, and the misconceptions about how we're viewed, how we are treated, how we've been treated like an invisible culture for so long. Yet you have people willing to write down in reviews. Perhaps, sure, you can go get it from the census, not even recognizing the ramifications of a statement like that. So, to your point, yes, reiterated 2030, write your ethnicity in as Gullah Geechee. But I want to take it a step further. How do we advocate and ensure that our language, traditions, history are preserved for future generations? I want to see us listed. I want y'all to write down Gullah Geechee so I can circle it or check it. Don't make me write it in.
Let's vote it on 2020. That's why I'm hoping 2030 we can just check it on ethnicity. But I'm thinking we likely won't see it until, because it's only every 10 years. We'll likely see it, the decades to come, where we can look back and smile, when we elders, and be like, look at it now. Look what we did.
At
that. Hopefully. But one of the questions you asked is, how do we preserve? And that's one of the questions I sat down with Ron and Natalie Days to ask, again, they're elders now, getting to ask them on the 29th anniversary of Gullah Island back in 2023. I got to sit down and ask them, like, hey, how do y'all think we can do it? And one of the things I love that she said that was so beautiful was that when we think about preservation, she thought about dipping it in ember and making it finite, making it, very static and mobile. But she talked about how, we're dynamic, we're evolving, we're moving, and that Gullah Geechee looks different than it did 40 years ago when her and Ron were like the only few people singing and telling our stories. Before, Gloria Naylor wrote Mama Day, before they got Gullah Island, before all these things, like even the process of things that had to go in motion in place for them to get that show. And I talk about that so much in my storytelling, because if they hadn't gotten that show, I don't know where we'd be at right now. So I don't know if we acknowledge that even within the community as much as we need to, that the role that they even played in the fact that we're here. That's why I mentioned Anita. That's why I mentioned Queen Quet, because these are people that I saw in the 80s and 90s growing up that have been doing this work for decades. Dr. Emery Campbell, he's a Harvard-trained public health microbiologist. So the fact that he helped get us clean water on the Sea Island. So when I say our legacy and our work has been going on, it's just the Gullah Church Nurse Association. People just didn't know. They were doing HIV work on patients, Black patients in Bluffton, that people didn't want to touch. The Gullah Church Nurse Association were the ones doing that. Sickle cell, they didn't know how to treat this in rural South Carolina. Out in Bamberg, Barnwell, the Gullah Church nurses were doing that. So it's like when you talk about, the government did, or who did, or whatever agency. No, baby. We did that. We've always doing that work for us, by us. And so I think the way that we keep going is what you said earlier too. We keep telling stories. And I was talking to a friend earlier today, and even talking about fiction as a form of resistance. And so when I talk about comic books and speculative fiction, two of my projects I'm working on, The Hellcats, which is about to be published in Black Women's Writers in South Carolina anthology. It's a reimagining of my grandmother's life in her rock band with her friends Lillian and Betty in the 1960s on the Sea Island. So a lot of Gullah Geechee culture there, but fiction. It's a form of resistance and reimagine her life in different ways. Had racism and segregation and things in South Carolina not played as big of a role, but it might be in a little bit. I'm working on Indigo Island, which is another project, a series of comics that are going to have heavy science education, but also themes around hoodoo and nursing, with the primary characters being nurses and a hospital on St. Helena Island. Another project that I'm working on is Bitter Roots. And so I'm the official correspondent for the back matter for this current run. And I don't know if people have read Bitter Root, but the artist on the comic book is from Monk's Corner. He's Gullah Geechee. And so I went to go interview him at a comic convention last year. And the camera was off rolling. We get tired, or we hungry, or we upset. Accent come off, right? All the forms of all the layers come off. And so he looked and was like, wait a minute, where are you from? Like the thing you try to hide ends up being the thing. Hey, come over to my booth. We start hanging out. He invites me into his booth, and he's like, oh, I want you writing on the next comic. And I'm like, oh, you don't got to do that. I'm a fan. I love this. Like, this is one of my favorite comic series ever. And my pop is next to me. She's like, she talks about this all the time. Like, and so I'm thinking, he ain't going to follow up. No, no child Sanford. Sorry, no offense. I'm thinking he's not going to follow up, but he does. And I end up, like I said, I'm the official correspondent for the back matter for these 5 issues in this current run of Bitter Root, The Next Movement, which is now the first set in the Harlem Renaissance. Now this is set during the Civil Rights Movement. And so the back matter, you heard it here first. I haven't told anybody really that I'm the official correspondent for Bitterroot in the back matter. And so it focused heavily on the Black American South during the Civil Rights Movement, with a lot of it focused on the crossroads of the South, which is Mississippi. And so, but he really wanted my perspective on the back matter as a true bred and blue Southerner, daughter of the dust, Gullah Geechee family. And so his artwork is incredible. But to meet a Gullah Geechee comic book artist as celebrated as Sanford Greene was like, wow. It's like open up all these doors and imagination. Like, wow. Like the powers of our ancestors combined, we out here doing the thing, and your girl, writing and getting paid for it. But I'm viewing it, my friend framed it as fiction as a form of protest.
I love that.
You're not going to forget about us. This is our stories. You're not going to forget about us.
That's right. And we have to tell our stories for us, by us. We can talk about us. We can study us. We can celebrate us. We can support us. We can uplift us. Everything for us. It's all about Gullah folks in this season. Dr. Toussaint, tell us how to say your name, child.
It's both, man. All Saints Day or French Louisiana Toussaint. My husband's family's from Dominica and the Lesser Antilles of the Caribbean. So a lot of people don't even know where it's at. And they're like, Dominican Republic. I'm like, no, Dominica. This is where you insert that flag so they can see it. It's one of the only flags in the world with purple in it. It has a sister parrot on it. But yes,
wow.
Dominica, and I'm proud to be in a very multicultural diaspora household. We don't got to do no wars, baby. There's room for all of us. So I am because
that's right. There is room for all of us. And I love that you say that, because sometimes people intentionally or unintentionally create conflict among people who are doing work. And I had this talk yesterday with a fellow commissioner on the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor. And I said, there's room for everybody. Everybody has their niche. Everybody has their lane, and everybody has their way that they're working toward this idea of preservation of our language, traditions, history, culture, stories. And I think it's important that we uplift one another and support one another and plug one another where we can, because that's what we're supposed to do. So as we wrap up today, I have some lightning round questions that I want you to answer. So if you could have dinner with any historical figure from Gullah Geechee history, who would it be and why?
Just one?
Yes.
Oh, see, I imagine a round table.
You want a big Sunday dinner.
I've had Harriet Tubman, Susie King Taylor, and Katie Hall Underwood. When I've imagined my time travel to who I could have at my table. Like I'm sitting at the table right now, I'm at the head, and I'd have the three of them.
And then they're around you.
Because a lot of them focused on our hoodoo and our health, and they were healers. Susie and Harriet during the Civil War, carrying their herbs to heal soldiers, Union soldiers, and Katie Hall Underwood, Katie's babies out on Sapelo Island. I'm not in midwifery, but I told you one of the things we talk about is Black maternal mortality and maternal health in the United States. And just knowing that she used a lot of herbs and everybody knew she carried her bag. And I'm like, I want to know, my burning question to all of them, those ladies, what was in your bag?
What was in the bag?
I want those herbs. Tell me the remedies so I can incorporate them into my lab. Everybody knows that's one of the things I want to do with my lab is not necessarily legitimize. I don't like that word because it kind of confirms that we need a certain gaze to tell us that our medicine works. Like even learning about infectious disease ecology, right? On a tangent, infectious disease ecology in Vibrio, we only get oysters during cold months because the same reason we keep hospitals cold, right? Keep bacteria low. So we don't want to transmit Vibrio and get sick and die by eating oysters not in season. So it also affirms the message from our ancestors that things need to be in season. Just because it's a good thing, in the right time. And so we need to be in season. And so I want to know their herbs. I want to know what's your bags, lady. I'm going to be like, Katie, you go. Susie, you go. All right, now you carry it. Tell me what's in your bag. Like
what's in your bag?
That would be, look, baby, if there was a heart-shaped herb right now, maybe I need to drink some Life Everlasting, like a certain quantity of it. So like the Black Panther, I can be transported into the plane and talk to them in the trees.
Talk to them and get all the answers. What is your favorite Gullah Geechee dish?
I got one on both sides of the family. Okay, mom's side of the family, we ate fish and grits every family reunion every summer. That's the Allen side of the family, fish and grits.
Okay, fish and grits.
And then my daddy's side of the family, my aunt made oyster rice every Christmas.
Ooh,
oyster rice, right? Oh man, I want.
Ooh, that's good eating. That's good to you. Okay, the last question. If you had to describe your life's work in 3 words, what would they be?
Faith, food, and family. I had great faith. I talked about some great Gullah food, and I love my family. I would hope that would be the things: faith, food, and family. That's how I'm building my lab ground. So it says faith, food, and Black futures. So
Faith, food, and Black futures. Dr. Ebony Toussaint, thank you so much for joining us on Gullah Talk today. I feel uplifted and inspired and just engaged and ready to dive into this idea of fiction as, you said, fiction as resistance.
Yep.
I absolutely love that. Can you tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, join you in your work, and just kind of continue to support all the things that you have going on?
You can mainly find me on Instagram and Threads. So lots of my thought pieces and writing is on Threads, and a lot of pictures and videos and things are on Instagram. Both are EbonyT_PhD. So
yeah, and you see it scrolling there. If you want to support her nonprofit, G is for Gullah, you can go to gisforgullah.com. And don't forget, it's okay for us to focus on us. And so today we're focusing on us and uplifting the story of Gullah Geechee people, modern Gullah Geechee folks who are doing amazing work that is on the backs and shoulders of our ancestors, who we never forget, we lift up, and we enjoy. So Dr. Toussaint, thank you again. Listen, if y'all want to see her back on Gullah Talk, because I almost feel like we need a part 2. We need like a follow-up so she can tell us, okay, I told y'all I was going to do all of this, and here are all the things. So we welcome you to come back anytime if you have anything. And thank you for dropping some big news here first on Gullah Talk. You heard it first here, all the new things that she's working on. But we can't wait to follow up with you and to know what you have in the pipeline. Thank you for being amazing. And we look forward to catching up with you next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me. I'll be back.